Yeah, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Good day, good evening. We span quite a number of um, time zones. I'm going to get us started. My name is Betsy Loring. I'm welcoming you to the Independent Museum Professionals program called Advocating for Queer People in Museums with speaker Margaret Middleton. The session is being recorded. I just wanted to point out that during the Q&A, the question and answer portion, we are going to be pausing the recording, and we'll have a little bit of conversation about some rules during that Q&A period. And then for our exit and goodbyes, we will be turning the recording on, but we just hoped that that would allow for a little bit freer questions and conversation. So welcome, everyone. My name is Betsy Loring. Next slide, Margaret. Thank you. Our poor speaker has suddenly had to become our slide person. My name is Betsy Loring. My company is Exploring Exhibits and Engagement, obviously, and I'm an independent museum professional, and I'm serving today as our moderator. A little bit of background, the Independent Museum Professionals is a professional network of consultants and freelancers who work in all areas of museum work and in all types of museums. Our network serves as a central hub. We provide resources, knowledge, and connection to other independent museum professionals. We are committed to supporting independent museum professionals, or IMPs, fostering strong relationships between independent museum professionals and museums, and advocating, advancing the broader museum field. If you're interested in getting involved, we are an all-volunteer organization, and we are growing, and we'll be providing more information about ways you can get involved as a member and as a volunteer. Laura, do you want to introduce yourself, or are you busy doing things?
I'm Laura Roberts. I'm going to be the back end behind the scenes Zoom person. If you've got any problems, you can just chat directly to Indie Museum Pros instead of bothering the entire group. Lovely to be with you
Thank
all today.
And we did have a lot of people. I think this may be a record number of people, tribute to Margaret Middleton. I'm going to do a very brief introduction. Oh, I guess next slide, Margaret, or yeah. Very briefly, Margaret Middleton is an American exhibit designer. They currently reside in the UK, in Manchester, England. But the reason they're here today is they're also a thought leader on advocating for queer people, both as visitors of all ages and staff. And so I know they have a little bit more introduction later on, so I'm going to let them speak about themselves. And I think that's everybody. So with that, Margaret, I'm going to, use the chat to introduce yourself, please. Standard Zoom protocols, please mute yourself for now. We did harvest all the questions when people registered. I will tell you, we got lots and lots and lots and lots of questions, more than could possibly happen in an hour. Margaret has done what they could to address a number of those questions within their slides, but then we're going to open it up for Q&A and try to get in some of the questions folks asked. We will not get to it all. We're just going to acknowledge that right up front. So Margaret, take it away.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks so much to Betsy and Laura for having me, and thanks everybody for being here. I think this turnout is also a testament to the fact that we're all thinking about this. I'm really grateful that this is something that you're all thinking about. I did try to think about your questions. I'm hoping that I'll answer like a fraction of them in the slides that I've prepared, but I am gonna try my best to keep it short so that we can have a really robust discussion, because I know there's a ton of expertise in this room that would be really great for us to share with one another. So with that, this is my contact information. I try to be as responsive as possible and then put as much of my work up for free on my website as possible. So please take note. This is my website, and I'll refer to it a couple of times because there are a few things in here that I want to share with you that are on that website. So as Betsy said, I am an exhibit designer. Um, I am from the US. I'm currently in the UK, and I'm based in Manchester, England. I have to say England because there's Manchesters all over the place. Um, and I so I spent the first 10 years of my career in-house, and I've spent the last 10 years independent. So it's really like an exact half and half right now. Um, and primarily my work is exhibition design. I do have a special focus on young children and their families and caregivers. And I also consult with museums and write about inclusive practice. So that's that's me. And I'm just going to get right into it. I want to acknowledge where we're at. This is the state. It's the state of the world, but it's also the state of our field specifically. So LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer lives are more visible than ever. Specifically, anti-trans legislation is at an all-time high. That's inclusive of the US and the UK. And despite, many years, and I really want to emphasize this, it is not new work to include LGBTQ lives in museums in the content that we're presenting to the public. It's just that there are so many museums that you can imagine that some of that really strong work that really does exist and has for decades now, it gets diluted. And it's just not, we're not seeing, we continue to not see LGBTQ themes in museums across the board. Like it's not common. So I want to say like it exists and we're doing it. And also we need to do a lot more of it. So that's where we're at. And of course, it matters. You all know it matters. When you're speaking to colleagues, though, maybe it's useful to use this kind of case-making language when you're advocating for queer content to be included in museums and why it's important for queer people right now, especially. So I always point to these two data points. Museum visitors report learning about others as one of the top reasons for their visits. People want to learn about other people who are different from them, and learning new things in museums anyway. That's why we go. Also, queer museum visitors are negatively impacted by not seeing their communities represented. We don't have it because of that fact that I just presented on the previous slide. We're not seeing LGBTQ content in museums consistently. We don't have great data on what it feels like for queer visitors to see their communities represented. So we have this negative stat. That said, as a queer museum professional, and I'm sure many people who are here today would agree with me, that I can say that I do feel positively affected when I do see queer content presented in museums. Now, I want to share. So this graphic doesn't appear in my piece. In 2017, I wrote the article, "The Queer Inclusive Museum for Exhibition Journal," and you can find that article on my website. This is a graphic that is derived from these 4 tiers of commitment to queer inclusion that I present in that article. So at the very top, we have programs, followed by temporary exhibits, then permanent exhibits, and then finally this base, this like the thing that it all hinges on is institutional commitment, and that includes systems, policies, and facilities. When I'm talking about the difference between programs and exhibits, I'm talking about time sensitive or time limited temporary things that have a beginning and an end. They're facilitated by staff members or outside folks, and they're facilitated and they're time specific. So if you don't sign up for that or buy your special ticket for that program or what have you, if you're not on the day that the program's happening, or you don't pick up the trail paper, you've missed out. So that's the reason why it's at the tippy top. It doesn't mean that it's not important to have programming. It just means that it's not as impactful as a temporary exhibit would be, which would be a longer engagement. More people can opt in. It does mean that once it's gone, and that um, there's potentially a separate ticket involved, that kind of thing. Permanent exhibitions have greater impact because you're reaching more people. So as you can see, as I come down these tiers, we're seeing like commitment is deepening as we get longer engagement, this lower threshold, meaning like you don't have to opt into it, it's just given to you. Wider reach, you have more folks can join in, and more integrated. So it's just part of how the institution works. That's that most important base piece there. And that what that means is that like queer inclusion is really baked into practice at the museum, and that's through when I'm talking about systems, I'm saying like it's part of the style guide. It's in every single department has a commitment, and the policies are queer friendly, and that you've got non-discrimination declarations, and um, you've got healthcare for everybody, the facilities, everybody can go to the bathroom at your institution, and that your baby care facility is non-gendered, all of these things, so it's across the board. It impacts every single piece of the visitor experience, no matter what day they come on, and it impacts staff too. So I just want to go into the specifics for how I can support queer inclusion as a freelancer. I really, it has changed. This is based on my experience going from in-house to being a freelancer. And it probably is in many, like I want to say, like in all of these cases, this is specific to my experience. So you know, please speak up when things are different from what you've experienced, and we can talk about that. I think I've divided this into two categories. I'm going to start with for visitors, and I want to include staff in here too. So when I'm talking about how I can support queer inclusion for visitors, all of these different ways that we can do that. So for programs, we can talk about target audiences, and we can talk about the content of the program itself. Sometimes we do both, and sometimes we choose one or the other, but in both of those cases, that's always a way for me to advocate for queer people. In exhibits, we can look at the content of the exhibit, but we can also talk about some of the themes if we're talking about any aspect of identity, or any queerness is always relevant. It can impact how we choose images and the language that we're using in the exhibit as well. For marketing and development, a lot of those same categories apply. We're talking about language, images, which donors we're going to take money from. I had an experience where I was working where it was in-house at a museum that we took money from Chick-fil-A. Like this was a while ago. And it was really, that was like a real challenge as like a queer staff member for, you know, the museum to sort of act like that wasn't taking sides in a way. And it didn't make me feel very supported as a staff member. Things like that. Um, for facilities, I touched on toilets and diaper changing, childcare and feeding, and accessibility. It's so well. We can get into any of these things specifically that you want to. I should mention that like anytime you see like some kind of minoritized population or community, our risk of being disabled or like our Venn diagram with disability is higher. So accessibility is always about like that's always an important part of queer inclusion is making sure that spaces are accessible, and we're talking about physically, and sorry, I'm like reading a lot of your like chat, which is really lovely, and I'm really glad that hopefully we'll be able to save some of it so that I can come back to it, because it's just so interesting. And then the policies. So you're thinking about like a code of conduct. This can be really, really helpful to have a code of conduct because it's something that's written down and it's a way for you to kind of come back to and say, oh, like we need you to change your t-shirt, for example, or we need you to like this is how we can make decisions about who's allowed in the space and what they're allowed to do in the space. And just having that written down is really helpful. It gives you something to go back to. Another piece, so part of this is language. So it's kind of runs through all of these categories. This is the family inclusive language chart that I made about 15 years ago. This is a helpful reminder of like some options for how to talk with visitors, people we don't know yet. You can use this with working with other colleagues too. It's not specific to visitors at all. It's just the common denominator here is anybody that you don't know yet. And of course, once somebody tells you how they want to be referred to and how they want to talk about the people who are special in their lives, then I just mirror what they say. So if they refer to their child as their son, then I can jump in and use the language that they use. So this is one of those like handy things that's on the website that you can download for free. So for staff, this is, I mean, I think it's easy to forget that queer inclusion isn't just for visitors. It's also really important for staff. So as a consultant, I find myself, these are the specific ways that I find myself supporting queer staff when I'm working with an institution. It's about either providing the training myself or helping hire somebody, helping identify the right person to do some training. And same goes for professional development. There's some similarities there, but I think like one of the ways that I would say that these two things are a little bit different is that professional development can be kind of a treat. And it's like it can be a perk of your job to receive, new information or hear from somebody from outside the museum. So training is really important for everybody getting on the same page and making sure that we're consistent as we're working with visitors and doing our jobs. But professional development can be it can be a way to help like involve leaders who may feel like they're beyond that like more basic, lowest common denominator type of training. So I guess I'd say both are great things to advocate for. There's also an opportunity to amplify colleagues' voices. So, if you hear something great in a meeting that maybe is, or if you had an aside conversation with somebody at your client's, somebody who's in-house at your client's, that you can be like, oh, like, have we thought about this? And that can be a way to help. And I guess that would be that what I'm really referring to when I say like, oh, have you thought about, is really about amplifying colleagues' concerns. They may not want their voices amplified for reasons. So just, ask about that first. If you're having that kind of side conversation. If it's coming up in a meeting, be like, oh, I really like what that person said earlier. And it's just a way to help like lend some of your consulting cachet to people in the room. And then this last one here is vague, but when I'm talking about like applying best practice, it's like I have opportunities to bring in outside. We've got this research here, or we've got this thinking here, and it can be helpful in and when I'm saying that, I'm really talking about like how staff can be, how best practice regarding staffing. It's like it opens up kind of like a whole can of worms, but there are ways to especially, I mean, it depends entirely on your role. I'm an exhibit designer, but I end up like becoming like a little octopus when I'm in a consulting role where I, find myself because it's best practice to work cross-departmentally anyway. So you can be like, oh, like can we involve this other department? Can we do this? Like have we, how do we and that can turn it, I mean it's more work. But if our goal is to advocate for queer people in museums, sometimes that's there are sneaky ways to get at that through by thinking about our roles in a really expansive way. Um, so I kind of started talking about this already, but I wanted to really focus on this. This is, to me, this is kind of the most important piece of today, is this like idea about freelance superpowers. What are the things that we do as consultants that is unique and gives us special opportunities? And the reason why I'm thinking about it this way, well, there are a lot of reasons why I want to think about it this way. One is that I am a consultant and I like to think of myself as somebody with power rather than somebody who's disempowered. I want to approach my work from a place of abundance rather than a deficit. So if I don't recognize where I have power, if I'm not doing that kind of power mapping, then I limit myself. And to me that that's not very fulfilling for me. So that's why I like to think of this as and I also think it's really easy for us to think about this in terms of deficit. Oh, if I were in-house, I would be able to do this, that, or the other thing. I'd have access in these other ways. Well, I don't. I'm not in-house. So I'm going to focus on the things that I'm good at and some of the things that I get as a consultant. So the first one is fresh eyes. I'm curious. I can ask questions. Sometimes, I mean, I was just away for a week and I came back to the house to my house where I live, and I'm like looking around. I'm like, wow, I see this I'm looking at this in a different way. Or how like sometimes you like smell things that you didn't smell before, like after if you've been away for a little bit, you know, it's entirely possible that people just like aren't noticing that thing on the floor or the smell in the air, right? So ask about it, be curious. This is like the thing that I like the most about being in museums anyway. So this is, and there's something kind of nice too about like, you're kind of being a tourist. You get to like, you have these, nobody's going to like look at you sideways if you don't know how they do things. The whole point is that you're getting to know the institution. So um, it makes you look interested. Um, and, uh, and yeah, you may uncover some things that like, oh, well, here's a simple thing that we could just be doing differently. So bringing that, um, I don't have the same kind of baggage that other people that I'm going to be working with on our team, the in-house team. They have a longer relationship with the institution and with their coworkers. So there are things that I can say that they can't necessarily or may not be safe doing. It's also my job is a limited engagement. So um, just by the nature of that, like shortened relationship time, I'm able to take risks that my colleagues who are in-house wouldn't be able to do if they really rely on that one job. I have other clients, I will have more clients in the future, like it's easier for me to take risks. This third one, it's not personal. I'm like, this is very related to the idea of no baggage. I'm less likely to be seen as motivated by a personal agenda. This gets us specifically all people who have minoritized identities working in the museum. Um, if you're advocating for the community that you're a part of, you're more likely to be singled out as maybe being selfish. And that's a really effective way to shut down our advocacy because like I think especially I'll speak especially for me. I really don't want to be seen that way. I don't identify that way. Like that's not my motive. Like, I feel like if I were a super selfish person, I probably would work in a different field and make a lot more money. And, I really care about other people. And so it like really hurts my feelings. That one really works on me. Is it if I'm being told that, oh, this is your personal agenda. You're centering yourself too much here. That's one of the reasons why feminists came up with the slogan, "The personal is political," because it's a way of showing that, oh, actually, like our personal lives do matter, and that we're not being selfish when we're advocating for people in museums, regardless of whether or not we're part of that community. This last one is that there's a certain cachet to expertise. So for that short engagement, being hired as a consultant, I'm seen as an expert in a way that may be different from the way that my colleagues who are also experts, but this is just how we're being seen in that particular in the consultant role. And this is the piece also about amplifying staff voices. So I want to say that one twice because I think it's really important. People at the museum are probably trying to do all of the things that I'm trying to do already, and I try to remind myself that. And they may have been shut down or roadblocked, red tape, all of that. And so, I can this is a bit of power mapping that I can do as a consultant. I can show this is work that you're already doing and it's great, and this is a staff member who should receive the recognition for that. And it's like if somebody doesn't want that kind of recognition and they say to you in private, like we're really struggling with this, leave me out of it. Then you can be the expert and be like, gosh, have you ever thought of this? And like, here's this brand new idea. And here I am presenting a brand new idea in a completely different way. And maybe they'll take it more seriously that way. So anyway, I think there are a lot of different ways to get at this, but for me, these are the four that I really rely on when I'm feeling maybe a little, especially I think when I'm feeling like a little out of power. It's helpful to like remind myself that we freelancers we can be very powerful. We do have ways of impacting the field, and I think that's exciting. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier. These are some planning tips. I'll just go down each of them and give like a couple of little examples, but if there's any of these that you want to get into, let me know. It's important to work across departments. It strengthens the longevity of a project. It helps embed it, and you can spread out the blame a little bit too that way. I think it's really helpful to use museum-specific resources and rely on museum experts. Every client's a little different. So if you have somebody, like you'll know right away, I think, like if the folks that you're working with don't have a huge amount of respect for the field. That could be, like there are like plenty of like corporate museums or leaders who just don't have like deep museum experience, who happen to value healthcare field more, or other places. So this isn't a one size fits all. But generally, I think it's good citational practice to like kind of keep it in the family if you can. Because yeah, for many old school or like old time like institutions, this does work rather well. Because I mean, I think, if you've done any kind of advocacy work, oh, that wouldn't work here, kind of that's one of the big excuses, right? So if you can show an example that's as close to what you're doing and what you want to do as possible, I've in my experience, that's worked pretty well. I want I I I always think it's a good idea to like involve community groups and work with communities. So I'm going to combine these two about co-production and co-curation and working with community groups. I think it's a good idea. It helps strengthen the work, and it's more likely to be successful, and accurate. That said, I think specifically when it comes to like queer exhibits and queer programming, we in the field rely on community participation in a way that is, it's like specific. It seems specific to queerness, in a way that like seems like, it shows our fear a little bit. So I feel like we should be doing these community collaborations from a place of like excitement and enthusiasm, rather than like fear of like getting something wrong, or wanting to pass the buck a little bit. That's what I'm seeing. So I think there's always like two sides of these collaboration initiatives, and I see this coming from a fear place more in when it comes to just so like it looks like covering our asses is what it looks like. And that's not fair to the community members that we're tapping for this work. It is work, it should be paid. And if it isn't, if we're working with a community group, it needs to be mutually beneficial. What can the museum give? This isn't like I think it's important not to treat this like charity work, that you're like gonna like do the exhibit for the community. It's if you're doing it together, it needs to be mutually beneficial, and just like we featured your community in the museum isn't good enough payment. And it doesn't really matter if they don't want anything. Like that's not, it's like you have like, especially when you're working with minoritized groups, like you'll often see that like people don't know what to ask for because they don't get a lot. And they don't have opportunities to like really dream big. It's really, so I would say like come to that meeting with some ideas, because you may hear, oh, we don't need anything, but you know, you have to go deeper than that. Anyway, I could go on and on about our overuse of co-production, co-curation, and community work when it comes to queer topics. Um, and but I'll just sort of I'll leave it there. And we can talk more if you want to. This is a resource that I have on my website that is, I call it Advocating for Social Justice in Museums. This is a planning tool, a case-making tool. And this is related to what I was just talking about with like this idea of like planning your approach. Here are some strategies. This tool is meant to like help plan out how you want to argue for what you want to do. So I'm focusing here on linking to mission, pointing to precedents, identifying allies, and supporting with research. And this is really about trying to come to that, like being persuasive from a variety of different standpoints to like fit the needs of the client. So if they're like really excited about research, I can go in on that. If they're much more interested in who are we working with and, you know, focusing on the ally piece. If they're more like a top level kind of person, if I'm working more closely with the director, then talking up, you know, how this relates to the mission and giving them some talking points for how they're going to talk to the board. Maybe that would be the strategy. I like having all of these filled out before going into a meeting like that, just because I don't always guess correctly what's going to work for folks. And as an industrial designer, I try not to make assumptions about my user group. So there's that. All right. And then, you know, finally here, I think that, I mean, I think from what I was understanding about our demographics for this talk, like most folks here are queer themselves, and like you understand that what we're dealing with here, like we're not, it's important to anticipate pushback because we understand reality. I do think that there's this sort of sentiment among allies who will say like, oh, it didn't even occur to me that somebody would have a problem with this program or this exhibit. And like that sounds nice and it sounds like good ally talk. But you know, it's not reflective of reality, and it kind of makes somebody sound like maybe a little like not tuned in to like everything that's going on around us right now. So, you know, I think it sounds nice, but really like true allyship coming at this like with eyes wide open. It looks like planning for pushback and hopefully not having to use any of those plans. So these are some of the questions that I recommend that a client asks themselves. And we will work on this together. You know, we can like this isn't just up to a client to just like fill this out. I can work with them on these things, but this does have to be a commitment that they take on. So ultimately, it is up to the museum putting on the program, exhibit, whatever initiative. It's like they need to sign on to this. So I ask that we consider, you know, how are we going to answer visitor questions? We like to put together an FAQ for staff. So that we're able to like come to this with a kind of a unified, consistent place, and also just to give staff the tools to be able to have what might feel like a really tough conversation if they're not ready for it. How are we going to respond to negative press? Like, are we going to shut down the comments in social media? Are we going to reply to people? We're going to just take down our post and just run away? How does the code of conduct address queerphobic words, behavior, symbols? Maybe some of our policies, facilities, and initiatives need updating. as a, in order to support any new thing that we're doing. And how are we going to respond to visitors who breach that code of conduct? What's the plan? And then if we're forced to cancel, this, I want to underline this one. If we're forced to cancel, how are we going to ensure that our partners get paid and stay safe? And that goes for staff too. How are you keeping staff safe? And like it is, I can't tell you how many times I've seen this. Cancel drag queen story hour, for example. And then at the last minute, right? And then the artist who you're working with doesn't get paid, just kind of gets hung out to dry. That's not cool. We need to have a plan. If canceling, like, even if you're saying that canceling isn't on the table, right? Because there was a contract, right? There should be an artist agreement for all of these things. Um, you know, but we need that plan B. And that means paying artists. And like ultimately, like in all of these cases, it's like really not up to me as the consultant generally to make sure any of this stuff happens. What's up to me is to help make sure that my client knows that they need to be thinking about this and talking this through with them if they need it. Implementation ultimately is going to be on them, but I can set us up for success if I get really proactive and talk us through all of this. All right, so I just have this one last little piece of reflection. Oh dear, yeah, I'm already. How about this? How about you do like a little screenshot of this, keep it for yourself to think about later, and then we can get right into our discussion. Is that okay?
Why don't you just read the questions in case somebody
Oh, you got it.
doesn't
You
have
got
a
it.
screen reader, and
Yeah.
then we can jump to questions and stop the recording.
Yep. So this reflection is this is an exercise where I'm asking 4 questions to myself. What is my expertise? Who values my expertise? That's that power mapping piece there. Who are my connections? Consultants, organizations, communities, who can I reach out to? More power mapping. And then the 4th question is, what types of advocacy are well suited to my sphere of influence? So if you're an architect, maybe you're more on the facilities side of things. If you're an educator, perhaps you're more on the programming side of things. So whatever that sphere of influence is, just it's thinking about like, what does advocacy look like in my role? And how do like and then maybe from that, you can think about like, where are those octopus tentacles going, as you think about expanding that to include advocating for queer people in museums.
Thank you very much, Margaret. So we have about 10 minutes or so for Q&A. Because there are so many people here, I think I'm going to ask people to raise their hands. Oh, I'm going to turn off the recording. Hang on.
No problem.
So thank you again, Margaret.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Sorry, I wish, well, I'll just say, let's keep talking, just yeah, shoot me an email, everybody on this call, like let's talk. And also, look at who else is here, and it'll give you a sense of who's thinking about some of the same things that you are.
Yeah, and there are definitely people who shared resources in the chat, so it might be that we can share that also. So I just wanted to say again, thank you. And Laura's going to be dropping email contacts for all of us in there. Please stay in touch with us. Info at Indie Museum Pros, INDIE Museum Pros, all one thing.com. If you want to, ask us any questions, you're also welcome to look on our website. You can find us online at indiemuseumpros.com. Email us. Ask to join the listserv. It is fabulous. It is an absolutely fantastic way to mine the collective wisdom, and you will get answers really quickly. We are on X or Twitter at Indie Museum Pros. We're on Instagram. We are on LinkedIn. We have a group on LinkedIn which you can join. If you're looking for other ways to get involved, I think next slide, Margaret, I believe. These are our socials. And then the next slide is ways you can get involved, I think. We're entirely volunteer run. If you have ideas for programs, we're going to drop a link to a survey to give us feedback on this program, but it's also an opportunity we ask if you have other program ideas. Please share them. We definitely base a lot of our programs on ideas that have been mined from the collective group. Please fill out that survey. We really appreciate it. And then I think the next slide has some upcoming events. In June, we have a June webinar. It's called Your Fee Survey Results Are In, which it helps to know that within the group, we did a survey of independent museum professionals in the group. What do we charge? What are our fees? So we'll be sharing that. The data set, I will warn ahead, is a little small, especially for some professions. So you have to take it with a grain of salt, but it's the start of the conversation about what we should charge. And then we've got other quarterly meetup meetings. I know there's one at the Association of Children's Museums conference. Quarterly, there are virtual meetups, great way to connect with everybody. So I want to thank you again, Margaret, for sharing your expertise. And thank you, everybody, for sharing your questions, sharing your resources. We really appreciated everybody's contributions. So stay tuned, stay connected, and thank you for joining us. Goodbye. I'm going to stop recording.